powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam Kaplan and Geoff Mosher. Mosher will be joining us in just a couple of moments. We'll talk a little birds and NFL with him. A lot of NFL thoughts on my mind, as, by the way, Eagles training camp has been set. Ha-ha! It's got music to my ears. It's not actually all that long from now that Eagles will be back at training camp. Single game tickets go on sale, I think, tomorrow. I'll get you that information. But I was more excited about the fact that the Eagles are going to be back, and we now know when they will be back, as the Eagles will be back at training camp. How about this? July 25th is when the Eagles are back at training camp. July 25th. I mean, you're talking about a month and 2 weeks from now that the Eagles. But single game tickets for all 10 Eagle home games go on sale tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Tickets can go to Ticketmaster.com. There is a 4-ticket limit per household, and you have the training camp public practice at Lincoln Financial Field, scheduled for Sunday, August 6th at 7 o'clock. I know a lot of people like to go to that as kind of a way to see the team up close and personal. Those tickets go on sale tomorrow. You get a chance to go to the stadium. A lot of people like to go to the stadium but don't want to pay regular season game prices. You can go out to the training camp practice, the public practice at Lincoln Financial Field. You can get practice general admission tickets for $10. That starts tomorrow. There's also a VIP option for $35, and that one is on August the 6th. Eagles training camp opens on Tuesday, July 25th. So you're talking about, really, today's the 12th, so 1, 2, 3, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Tuesdays from now. We are back with Eagles practice. So 7 weeks from tomorrow, we're back at Eagles training camp. And then the preseason opener, which is on Thursday, August 17th against Cleveland. They have that game at home, Indianapolis. So they have 10 times that the team will play at Lincoln Financial Field. By the way, the game against Indianapolis, I just am seeing this right now. The Thursday preseason game against the Indianapolis Colts is on Prime Video only. So preseason football is coming to Prime on Thursday night. That'll be the game where Prime gets like their one, I guess, I don't know if they're one. They might be having a full preseason schedule, but that's where the Prime team, Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit, get their opportunity to kind of iron it all out, get their broadcast together. People put the preseason football games on for multiple reasons. One, because it's football. Two, the announcing teams and the production teams and all that stuff, they need to get repetitions as well to get ready for the season. And the Eagles preseason game against Indianapolis, that'll be on Prime Video. And then, of course, the regular season games, they will have 8 regular season games at home, and that all starts. But training camp is the big news. July 25th is when Eagles camp, that was announced today, and single game tickets go on sale starting tomorrow at Ticketmaster. But we'll bring Geoff Mosher into the conversation now and get his intel from OTAs on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN for another edition of Football at 4. Don't forget the Inside the Birds podcast. Check that out on all podcasting platforms. On the latest edition, Adam and Geoff got intel on the team's OTA practices, so we'll get into that as well. But first, I want to get Geoff's thoughts on this. And Geoff, first off, welcome back, bud. Happy Monday to you. Secondly, we saw the conversation, or the quotes, I should say, from Miles Sanders over the weekend, basically saying, I wasn't happy with the Super Bowl and the way it went. 7 times 16 yards in that game. And my question really goes to, was that more of the way the Eagles view running backs and how they fit into their offense, or is that more on Miles Sanders and what they thought of him?
Well, I don't, and by the way, happy Monday to you as well. I don't think that I think that they've shown that they'll use their running backs when their running backs are effective, and especially if they're facing a tough opponent who's got a good beat on their passing game. So Miles Sanders didn't have a great start. And I think that what we saw last year is even in sort of a career year, there were times that the leash was kind of short on Miles Sanders if he wasn't doing the right thing. But for the most of the year, he did. But you saw in the Super Bowl a couple of the early runs trying to bounce to the outside, threw a pass to him, couldn't handle it. And you also saw sort of in, I want to say December-ish, going into January, that the team was starting to use Kenneth Gainwell more after kind of a rough start for his second season. So it didn't surprise me, obviously, in the game of the magnitude of the Super Bowl, that they had a low tolerance for anything Miles was going to do that looked like he wasn't ready for the moment. And when he bounced a few runs to the outside, couldn't handle a pass, it seemed like they just wanted to get the most reliable person they felt, get the touches. And they also threw the ball a lot. They got up, and then all of a sudden Kansas City came back on them. So, obviously Jalen Hurts had a great game. They don't have a running game, to me, Mike, that has always been predictable. It's always been a running game that they could shift to when necessary. I always wanted to come out passing, but you remember the Jaguars game, right, when it was pouring rain, they just weren't throwing the ball really well, and they shifted to a run game, and all of a sudden it was like, bam, they just ran all over the Jags. It always felt like a great fallback for them when the passing game wasn't going. But even when it was a fallback, it wasn't always just Miles Sanders. It was going to be a rotation.
Yeah, now Sanders said earlier in OTAs that he wants to get back to where he was as a rookie when he had 50 catches. He caught 50 balls that year. I think people almost forget that because he was almost non-existent in the passing game. 50 catches. He also had over 500 receiving yards, which was 7th best among running backs. So what do you think happened to him in the pass game? Is that more on him or the offense evolved into a different direction?
Wow, it's Adam and I, it's funny you say people forget about that, but Adam and I talk about that constantly. Just sort of the two stories of Miles Sanders, the first 2 years, the last 2 years, and there was success at times in both. Obviously, this last year was a great year for him numerically and also as a runner, just a patient runner, seeing the hole, hitting it hard. We always felt he was misdiagnosed as too much of a dancer. It really wasn't the case. But yes, in year one, he did something. Doug Peterson unlocked something in him that we didn't even see Miles Sanders do at Penn State, which was catch the ball, and not just catch the ball, but catch the ball downfield. If you go back to his rookie year, the games against Minnesota and Detroit, where he wound up having some over-the-shoulder catches down either the sideline or the seam, the H-seam pass that you see running backs who can catch the ball well, run a lot in the NFL. He was doing that. And year two was remember that was the terrible year for them, and things didn't go right. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was the bad year. And he was not sure-handed. He dropped passes, caught some balls, but not as much. So I get it from his angle. He's reunited with, well, not reunited. He's back with a coach in Frank Reich who thinks like Doug Peterson has the same style of offense. And I would understand him wanting to get back to be that player he was his rookie year who caught a lot of nice passes down the field. However, I would hope that for his sake, he'd rather be the runner from his last 2 years. The running back who was much more patient and grinded out some pretty tough yards over the last 2 years. I know we all made a big deal of him not scoring any touchdowns 2 seasons ago, but the tape showed you he was not fleet of foot around the hole. I mean, he was hitting the hole, he was following blocks. He was a harder runner than he was given credit for.
Yeah, I mean, 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns. I think we forget that he scored 11 touchdowns last year.
Right.
The Eagles are going to have to find, their way to get back to 1,200, whether they do it with one guy or multiple guys. But those 11 touchdowns as well, and, you take a look at the playoffs, though, it looked like Gainwell started to kind of shift over already at that point, and the writing was kind of on the wall. Now, he got a big contract. The Eagles weren't going to pay him what he ended up getting, but you wonder if the writing was on the wall in the playoff that he wasn't coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I think the writing was always on the wall. I mean, not that, it was never going to happen. I'm sure it could have happened because you just don't know what someone's going to get from a contractual standpoint. But it was pretty clear that if Miles Sanders got decent money, that it was going to be from another team and not the Eagles. And, of course, he did. And, I remember saying all year long, there's going to be one team. It all depends on what happens with the other running backs who are free agents, and they all wound up getting tagged. Right? Saquon got tagged, Jacobs got tagged, I believe, and then Tony Pollard got tagged, if I'm not mistaken. So yes. Miles wound up being the best, or one, him and David Montgomery right there, 1 and 2 for free agents. And you just knew there was going to be a team that has a lot of cap space that's willing to pay a running back more than a team that doesn't have a lot of cap space and has other guys to pay would be willing to pay him.
Over at Inside the Birds, the latest podcast, Adam and Geoff got some intel on what they're hearing from OTAs. It just wrapped up on Friday last week, or I guess Thursday of last week. So let's look at some of the things you guys are hearing about some of the battles. Let's go to right guard, and what did we learn from these 2 weeks of OTAs about where that is going to enter training camp?
Yeah, I mean, the lack of contact, and when I say lack of contact, I mean when you watch the drills, right, the team drills, they do like a 6-on-8. They don't have interior defensive linemen. They don't have offensive linemen. So really, you only make a little bit about what you see with the way the group formed up. And obviously, we saw Tyler Steen and both Cam Jurgens get some right guard action. It's funny. I had an interesting conversation with Brian Baldinger, who was at one of the OTAs, and we were just talking about the spot. And I asked him for an offensive lineman's opinion on it, and he said, you got to think about it from a Jason Kelsey standpoint, not just the right guard standpoint. Jason Kelsey is an undersized center, and for the last few years, he's had Isaac Seumalo next to him, he's not a huge guy. He's not 330 or anything like that, but country strong. I mean, can really move people, played at a pretty good level when healthy for the last few years. And now you're talking about putting someone next to him who's either never played right guard, and Cam Jurgens has only played offensive line for 2 years, right, at Nebraska, and only center, and is also undersized. Or you're talking about moving a guy who's only played tackle in Tyler Steen out to right guard and seeing what that can do. And Brian said, which is something I hadn't thought of, he goes, you would probably want to favor the bigger body here, the bigger, stronger guy, whether it's Tyler Steen or even maybe Jack Driscoll, because Kelsey's an undersized guy, and when you have to put a combo block on Dexter Lawrence of the Giants twice a year and other big guys like that, those guys are 330, 340-pound defensive tackles. You need to know that if you're Jason Kelsey, after that, while you're combo blocking, when it's your turn to move up and cover a linebacker, that the dude you're leaving to finish off the block on Dexter Lawrence can hold up. And I think it's worth wondering if Cam Jurgens can do that. Now, he's got training camp to show it, but you would figure Tyler Steen can do it because he's been a tackle and he's used to going up against, and he's a bigger man himself and he's used to going up against bigger athletes.
Yeah.
So I would think the coaching staff would like Tyler Steen to win this out. Cam Jurgens has an opportunity, but he keeps playing center, by the way, on these maintenance days when Jason Kelsey doesn't have to practice. So sometimes those reps are taken away from him, and I wonder if that's just because this coaching staff knows it's most likely going to be Tyler Steen in the end, or they do have a fallback guy in Driscoll, who of all three guys, Mike, is the only one that has actually played right guard.
Yeah. Oh, and I find him to be the interesting one because you're right. He's the one who's played there, but he's also really the only guy they have to play the swing positions.
Right. And he, by the way, I thought, and sometimes looks can be deceiving, but I thought he looked a little bit more bulked up here in OTAs, on the upper arm area. So maybe he, did that, tried to add some weight, strength, just because he's competing for right guard, and that's a position that takes a toll. He's had some injuries in the past, and he wanted to be as big and strong as he possibly could to try to win the job.
You mentioned right guard of who they would maybe like to see there. Steen, they drafted him. Who would they like to see? Sidney Brown is a guy you guys talked about on the pod. What do they see from him, and who would they like to see win that job?
Yeah, I think they would love to see Sidney Brown win that job. He's a rookie. He's a third-round pick. He has a great skill set for the position, and if he does not, because of either poor play or just taking a while to adjust, then that wouldn't be a negative. It's a really difficult position sometimes to learn and adjust to in a Fangio-style defense when you're constantly too high, but then moving into the box or moving into the post. Somebody else is moving into the box. You're doing a lot of pre- and post-snap movement, right? So if he were not able to really excel right away at training camp and they couldn't start him, then you're kind of looking at going with Reed Blankenship, who's probably, in fairness, going to be best as a number 3, like a third safety or a backup safety. And then you also have maybe, Justin Evans. We have no idea what to expect from Justin Evans. And the guy missed 3 straight years before coming back to the Saints last year. And
you almost forget that he's here, right? You almost forget that he's here.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, Kevon Wallace, who, when I watched the OTAs last week, he was kind of like the first. No, he was not the first one out. Reed Blankenship was the first one with Edmonds. But then later he wound up being first team with Edmonds. So they're clearly rotating as they often do. But I think we all know that the Kevon Wallace starting ship has sailed by now. It's very he's going to be fighting to make the team. So obviously, if Sidney Brown, who will have a great opportunity to start if he does acclimate and transition well, can be your starter. But if not, it's sort of like a who's who of question marks. So there'll be every opportunity for Sidney to try to win the job if he acclimates well.
Yeah. All right. Football 4. Check out the Inside the Birds podcast. And by the way, we got a note today. The Eagles will open training camp July 25th. So you have 7 weeks from tomorrow to rest up, buddy.
Oh, that's 7 weeks. That goes by so fast, Mike. You know that.
Oh, I'm saying, it's going to be, we're going to blink and it's going to be July 25th and they're going to be out on the field. It's going to be great. I said, I can't believe it. They announced it today. I said, yeah, July, generally late it comes. And then I said, that's 7 Tuesdays from tomorrow that they're going to be back on the field. That really flies by. You know how fast the summer goes.
Yeah, well, Nick Sirianni for 7 straight weeks is going to go to bed praying every night that none of it, he doesn't wake up to any of his players in police trouble or anything like that. It's a long time.
Very cool. All right, man. We'll talk Wednesday.
All right, take care.
Football at 4, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.